country lads, come from a small farming background, and worked hard all their lives and came into Bordemona when the opportunity arose. And I often heard them saying that they were sorry that it took so long to come to Bordemona, that they weren't in it sooner, but it probably didn't suit or whatever at the time. But there were two very strong men, two very strong people, hugely powerful. To pinpoint that, in the earlier days again in development, the two boys were ploughing in a different area, and there was a serviceman would bring around diesel and engine oil and water and so on and so forth. So I can remember the serviceman pulling up in an area one evening, and I was with him, and he said to me, I have to leave off a barrel of diesel here for the two boys, the two Hickey brothers. They're ploughing, and I'm tied for time now this evening. He says, will I drop it off here? And they were a mile up the bog, and I could see one of them waving, and then the next lad waved, and he took it that was okay, drop off the barrel there. But they kept waving a bit anyway, but he let down the side of the trailer and rolled the barrel off, down off of the edge of the road, down into the fall of the bog, and the barrel rolled out about 10 yards or whatever before it stopped. Now this was pure bog, there was no drains or no gravel areas or no nothing like that, and a full barrel of diesel would be, I don't know, 600 or 700 weight, maybe something like that. I'm not sure of the exact weight, but they kept waving and waving anyway, and PJ was the lad's name, the serviceman. PJ said, God, I better wait till they come down. I think he says they might want something else they're waving at. So it took them so long to come down anyway, and they came to near us, and one of them came over and said, God, we're only after getting diesel early this morning, and we're moving from here to that other bog over there, and it's over there we wanted it. And PJ looked at me and said, any chance of you getting it hauled over by a bulldozer or a sleigh? You couldn't drive in a tractor, you just couldn't back in the trailer, you couldn't go off the road because you were on a main road. And the two lads looked at one another, and I knew that they were hatching a plan between them, didn't say much. And they turned around to say, the serviceman, and said, let down the side of that trailer and we'll see what we can do. And the two of them walked over, one at each end of the barrel, got a good grasp of it, lifted it up, walked up the trailer. Now the trailer would have been shoulder height because they had to walk up an incline at least. And one of them said to me, give us a back shove. And they lifted it up and put it back into the trailer and closed the side cart of the trailer in case it rolled out. And I looked at the serviceman, he hardly had moved, and he was as white as a sheet. I said, what's wrong with you? He said, just imagine, he said, if you got into bother with either them two or the two of them, he says, how you'd end up. He says, I'm frightened. So they thought nothing of it, just to put it back up and make it handier to deliver to another area, different area. Just those two guys, they saw a way of doing everything, or getting the problem solved, in other words. Two very genuine.
The original engineers of our time, and physically well able to...
Yeah.
I mean, was it hard? Was it physical? I mean, we know it was outdoors, but...
It was hard work. Walking the bog now, and you're walking on a sponge all day long for 8 hours, is hard work alone. And replacing a lat or two that had been knocked down and to replenish it down along. And in the earlier days then, there was winches on these ploughs, but at this stage they had advanced to hydraulics that you could pull a lever and the plough would come up and catch and drive on. But one time when you got to the headland, you had to winch up this plough out of the bog, so it was hugely laborious, and you needed strength to do it. And it probably took two lads. Even the earlier machines, they were all operated by winches. winches and things like that. So, yeah, the drainage was all laborious work, labour. You just had to work in. Then they introduced a system called piece rate, and you got paid for what you do.
Was that a good thing?
Oh, it was a good
not?
system because, like everything, some lads are better than most. Some of them have more strength and be more used to it. Like, you know, they're nearly all country lads with small bits of land, all hard workers, and so on and so forth. And that was the way at the time. You worked your shovel or you worked the fork or whatever. And the biggest problem with that was that the bog was so soft. You'd have what they call a footboard with your tool, and when you take up the footboard or take your weight off it, the bog would come up with you. And if the supervisor didn't measure it while you were digging it, there was always a row. There was always a row over digging. Oh, you didn't dig it deep enough. But you go back and put the footboard in it and stand on it, and it would go down to the 0.9 of a metre and step off it then to come up. That was so soft, like, you know, so it always created a row, especially if the supervisor had a bad night the night before, or their team were beaten or whatever. You know yourself. Yes, you did.
I mean,
No. But you know, with all the different parishes represented by people, there were huge numbers of people and counties. Then in Blackwater, for instance, you had 4 counties: Offaly, Roscommon, Galway, and people from Westmeath. You were in all 4 counties. And it's amazing the different culture and the different systems, and if you had time or sense enough to listen to what way to do things, and, you know, encourage them to work smarter, work better, and get the job done still. You know, everybody had a different view or different idea. Okay, there was people then that just couldn't manage that, and there wasn't much further on until machinery came in. I saw people having to be trained to drive tractors because they didn't have them at home. There was no machinery at home in the earlier days. Everybody nearly had to be trained to drive a tractor, and then other machines, and there was a couple of machine driving instructors that were there to highlight the do's and don'ts as regards machinery, because, again, unique industry, unique machinery, unique type of instruction and experience, because you could drive out a machine out of the workshop and you mightn't get 100 yards in it to be buried to its neck, and that happened too on occasions. Several bad sinks. So. But
how big a job was the retrieval of the equipment that went down, or did they leave it there sometimes?
No, I never saw one left totally, but I did hear of a few that was left. But I did see where we had what we call the bulldozer, a D4, went totally underground, and the water flowed over the top of the cab, and it went down and down, that you go in with what we call a ranging rod, 5-foot red and white pole, and you try to see where it was in the morning. It was gone. But we got out.
How far would that be down?
12 to 15 feet from the bottom of the track, you know? It's at the bottom of the track.
Somebody that doesn't know about the bog, that seems like a huge distance that something could go down overnight.
Yeah, it went in a slap. Just to highlight that, when they were doing the motorway from Portlaoise to Limerick, there was a high-mac buried in the bog somewhere along there for 25 years. And a guy from my part of the country went down and salvaged it because he knew what to do. And it was 25 years there. There was an appeal sent out by the owners of it to see could they help out, and it was taken out.
Would the bog preserve machinery as well as it preserves oak and people sometimes?
No, there'd rust like hell in it.
Would it?
Yeah. steel and...
Well, it's fascinating how it preserves people, though, and
Because of the absence of air within the system and the acidity of the bog. It's not mineral soil, so the acidity preserves trees, bog oak, and human bodies, and has done for years, thousands of years maybe. Bog butter. We came across bog butter numerous times, buried in the bog, where people, in the olden times, the cow only milked for about 6 months of the year because they didn't have continuous grass and feed. There was no feed. There was just enough, maybe of hay or whatever, to keep the animal alive over the winter time. But the cow wouldn't milk, but they'd make the butter during the summertime, put it in some sort of a casket or timber urn or whatever, bring it down and bury it in a certain area of the bog and retrieve it during the winter time. And it was quite edible. I came across bog butter, and I don't know, it was hundreds of years there. It was like chalk. We tasted it 3 or 4 years. We're still alive anyway, so...
you don't look too bad.
It didn't kill us anyway, so that's all I...
It preserved you.
Well, I should have eaten more of it, maybe.
You're doing all right. Were you aware of that? That this was, or is at the time, this is a very special place. Were you always aware of that? Did you always know that you were in a place of some... It was special.
Oh yeah, you were in a special place. I'd say nearly everybody that worked in the company is outdoors anyway. Different when you're in the office and accounts and clerks and workshop and so on. It was different scene. But out the bog, out in the open air, yes, you were in different scene, especially at night. Especially at night. We worked sometimes 24 hours a day. Now, you'd be out there in daylight, everything grand, get your location, look where you are. But when the sun went down and the stars came out, totally different scene. And I saw the finest of hardy men, as we'd say, lose concentration, lose their sense of where they'd be. And some of them would even become terrified at night. Terrified at night. Now, especially if you had a large group of people and somebody telling ghost stories when they were in at the tea break, that really rounded it off altogether. And believe me, that did happen. That happened on numerous occasions, telling stories, and they wouldn't understand that some people were nervous or frightened or afraid. During the day, the finest in broad daylight, you could see where they were going, but at night time, totally different. And I can honestly say, and I worked a lot at night as well, I never saw anything worse than myself out there.
What did you see out there?
That's a lot of other stories. You'd hear things at night, you'd hear...
Will-o'-the-wisp.
Well, you see that was the gases escaping from the bog at different times in different areas. Will-o'-the-wisp, jack-o'-the-lantern. And the stories used to go that people going home from Ramlin houses in years gone by used to follow this will-o'-the-wisp, and it would lead them astray rather than lead them home. They thought it was a light near home or whatever, but it used to lead them astray because it would move all the time. It was moving. So, yeah, saw that from time to time. Not too often, but a couple of times.
Scary?
Yeah, scary, all right. Yeah, scary. And I suppose in our younger days, you'd be always warned by your parents and your grandparents in particular, don't wander off, don't fall into a bog hole, don't jump into swim in it or anything like that, because you'll never be seen again. So that more or less was kind of normal to everybody, every young child and everything. But unfortunately, it did happen from time to time. Yeah, outdoors was special. As I say, I saw the hardiest of men and toughest of men, and at night time, different. A story. Many years ago, Bordemona developed a new type harvester called a Type 6, and it was a big high machine, self-driven, not like what they have today. They're mainly towed like farm machinery behind them, harvesters and so on. But this was a huge machine, and great machine, but difficult to drive. And if it did sink, you had a serious sink. And some lads, older personnel, would be looking at them and they'd say, well, they'll sink in the high road. That means they're not suitable for the bog or whatever. There were certain sayings within the company that you kind of recognise. But anyway, being a supervisor, and I was in a new area that came from development into production, and I knew the area like the back of my hand. The driver on the late shift, as I say, a tough individual, afraid of nothing, went down to him to collect him for his tea just at dusk, maybe 11 o'clock I think it was, and we'll be working late into the night. And he coming down the steps, he'd be about 20 feet off the ground, coming down the steps, maybe more. I said to him, make sure and turn off the lights, because there were strong lights in the machine and they'd run down the battery. And we'd be gone, take 15 minutes to get back to the tea centre, have his tea and a bit of comfort and back. It could be nearly an hour from the time you'd leave the machine till you'd be back. And as we were going uphill and down dale and valleys and that, coming back, we had a good bit to go. We're just at the tea centre, and I looked behind, and here was the lights on in the machine. And he did turn them off. And I said, PJ, did you forget to turn off the lights? I had to ask him. No, I didn't, he said. And I said, look, what's that? There's someone on that machine. So I said, you go in and have your tea now, and I'll go back, because if we leave the lights on, the battery will be down and there'll be no more work. I said, we don't want that anyway. I want to make more money. Went back and turned off the lights on the harvester, wheeled around and came back as fast as I could, and he was just coming out of the tea centre ready to go back to work, and I picked him up when we went up over a little hill again and looked off in the distance, and here was the lights on again in the machine. And he says to me, I don't think I'm going back there tonight. I said, sure, we have to go back and turn off the lights. If you're not driving the harvester, we may all go home. You know, if you weren't harvesting the peat, returning kilos lifted, you go home. And we went down, he never spoke. And went to the machine again, turned off the lights, and they turned off normally, go up, and the engine just about started, but it did, revved it up for a minute, turned on all the lights, everything working. Now I said, work away. He said, you better stay on the headland here now to see, and go up and down to see that everything is all right for fuel. And I said, why, you're not afraid? Well, he said, somebody was turning on and off the lights. But as it happened, electrician was out, would do the normal routine from area to area each day and check these little things and so on. And we checked out the switch at the bottom of the stairs, and it just would turn off the thing but didn't stay, and it would flick back. But everybody thought there was a ghost or there was somebody there, and it was people frightened that night. But that's what happened. You see, you kind of have to...
I don't think it was a trip and switch at all. You're messing with me. There was a ghost, the ghost of the machine. Wait, was superstitions are a huge part of Irish people's... of us, culturally.
Yeah.
Superstitions are... on the bog, were you superstitious? Were you more so? Were you more in tune with nature and the changing of the seasons, which would have been the way our ancestors around here were? Like, did you feel it was different, or did you feel...
Yeah, the area was different, the location was different, the job was different, the culture was different. But you did learn fairly quickly. There was 3 kind of commandments in Board Namona when you started. You brought your shovel when you started. You brought your lunchbox, whatever you had to eat, and you brought rain gear. And if you didn't have either the 3, especially your shovel, you didn't have a work. If you didn't have your lunchbox, well, you starved all day. And if you didn't have rain gear and it rained, you got drowned. So you learned fairly quickly. Supervisors and that, I kind of took a huge interest in the weather conditions and the rain and the direction of the wind and all the rest of it. And you could tell, like our ancestors, well, that wind is blowing loads of rain. Like, let's get the job done as quick as we can. Change the meal breaks, if possible. Lads, look, it's going to rain, so we'll try and get this done. And when it rains, we can have our tea in comfort and whatever time I call it, So now some lads wouldn't see that, they'd insist on having their tea break, and that was it. But most lads saw it. There was kind of central weather stations. There was one in Bora and one in Derrygreena. And then Blackwater had their own recording station. It wouldn't predict the weather, but you'd have the atmospheric pressure and the rainfall and the drying and so on. You record that everywhere. And then we got to the stage we had a little copper funnel and copper cylinder, and you take your own rainfall. And if the rainfall was under 2 millimetres and the day was drying, it looked like you could have some production that day. But if it was 4 or 5 millimetres or 6 millimetres, that day was literally gone as regards production. It wouldn't dry out in time until tomorrow.